Welcome to the deep dive. We are diving into a market today that you might not think about every day, but it's actually pretty significant. Endodontic files.
Yeah, our listeners shared a report with us that focuses on the year 2025.
Mm.
So we're gonna extract the key insights from it about these, essential dental tools.
Wise.
Um, think about it this way: these are the tiny instruments that dentists use when they're performing root canals.
Yeah, for folks that aren't super familiar with it, imagine like a very small specialized file.
Yeah,
And that file allows dentists to clean and shape the inner canals of your teeth
right.
during a root canal procedure. So like advancements in these files, it directly impacts the effectiveness and also the efficiency of the treatment.
So this report's projecting that the global market for these endodontic files is going to reach 48.2 million USD in 2025. But here's where it gets really interesting, okay? They're anticipating this market to grow even more to 72.86 million USD by 2033,
Wow.
which is a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR of 5.3%. That's pretty significant expansion.
Yeah. In what seems like a very specific niche.
It is.
What's driving this kind of growth?
Well, I think there's a couple key factors that are contributing to this growth.
Yeah.
One of them is the increasing global demand for minimally invasive dental procedures.
Right.
People are looking for treatment that's, less painful, allows for quicker recovery. And advanced endodontic files, they really help with that. And then the second thing is, the report mentions continuous innovation in the design and materials of these files.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just like little, improvements here and there.
Hmm.
It sounds like there are advancements in just dental technology overall that are also playing a part here,
Right.
creating demand for even more sophisticated files to kind of complement, better imaging and diagnostics and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. As diagnostic capabilities improve, dentists are able to identify and treat issues with more precision. And so that in turn drives the need for more, advanced endodontic files. And then another thing is we can't really overlook the impact of government initiatives
Right.
in different parts of the world that are focusing on, better dental care access
Yeah.
and the quality. And these often lead to a wider adoption of modern dental techniques.
Now, let's take a look at the geographical landscape for 2025. Okay.
Okay.
North America, it looks like the dominant force here, holding over 40% of the global market, which if you break it down is about 19.28 million USD. Europe follows with over 30%, a market size of 14.46 million USD.
Yeah.
And then Asia Pacific comes in third at around 23%, or 11.09 million USD. Seems like those are some pretty clear leaders regionally.
They are. And I think it's super important to, understand why these specific regions hold these shares. So North America's lead probably reflects their already established healthcare infrastructure, and then they have a history of adopting dental technologies very early on.
Yeah.
Europe also benefits from a really strong and mature dental market with, high standards of care.
And it looks like the type of endodontic file that's leading the charge right now are rotary files.
Right.
Now, for our listener, these are basically endodontic files that are powered by a motor.
Okay.
Making this cleaning and shaping process more automated compared to manual files.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of dominance really signals a move towards, these more mechanized instruments, right?
For sure. Rotary files have become really popular because of their efficiency, and then they also increase the precision
Right.
offered during root canal treatments, and they can often reduce the overall treatment time.
Okay.
And they also produce more predictable outcomes in shaping the root canal.
The report also points out some things that could possibly, slow down the growth.
Okay.
Two key restraints they talk about are a lack of adequately trained professionals
Yeah.
who can actually use these files, and then limited awareness of these, more sophisticated options that are out there in rural areas.
Right.
And those seem like pretty important challenges, right?
Okay. Yeah, they are, because, innovation in products is only one part of, what needs to happen. You also need skilled practitioners that are, good at using the tools.
Yeah.
And then patients also need to be aware of the benefits so that they actually seek out these treatments.
Right. But even with these hurdles, it seems like the overall picture is still pretty optimistic.
Yeah.
There's the increasing preference for these rotary instruments,
Yeah.
and then the expansion of dental education programs,
That's great.
which is really encouraging, right? It suggests that the industry is actively working to address these limitations.
Right.
Okay, let's dive even deeper into the market size and the growth. We've already talked about the 2025 figure of 48.2 million USD globally,
Right.
and the projection to reach 72.86 million USD by 2033 with that CAGR of 5.3%, which is really, emphasizes that expected upward trend.
It does. And having a consistent CAGR of 5.3% over, an 8-year period, it really indicates stable and significant expansion.
Right.
It suggests that there's a healthy, underlying demand
Yeah.
and a continuous stream of innovation that's keeping this growth going.
Okay. Let's break down these regional figures because the dynamics are, they vary quite a bit.
Okay.
Starting with North America, that 19.28 million USD market in 2025. It's expected to grow at a CAGR of 3.5% between 2025 and 2033. Now, within North America, the United States is, the major player here. 15.21 million USD and a 3.3% CAGR.
Right.
Which, makes sense given the market size. However, Canada, with a 2.31 million USD market, is actually projected to grow a little bit faster
Interesting.
at 4.3%.
Yeah.
And then Mexico at 1.75 million USD at 4%. What catches your eye with these North American numbers?
Well, I think what's interesting is that while the U.S. holds the biggest share
Yeah.
because of its established infrastructure
Right.
and the technological advancements, Canada and Mexico are actually showing slightly more accelerated growth. So this could possibly mean that they might have a faster adoption rate of newer technologies or maybe an increasing focus on advanced dental care
Right.
compared to like the already, pretty mature U.S. market.
So moving over to Europe now.
Okay.
The total market in 2025 is 14.46 million USD, with a projected CGR of 3.8%. The UK leads the way with 2.43 million USD and a 4.6% CAGR, that's pretty robust.
Yeah.
Germany is also a significant market here at 2.86 million USD with a 4% CAGR. And that's probably because of their, history with technological innovation in dentistry.
Right.
We also see numbers for France, 1.33 million USD, 3% CAGR. Russia at 2.24 million, 2.9% CAGR. And what's interesting is that, even smaller markets like Luxembourg at 0.45 million USD,
Way out.
3.9% CAGR. And Greece at 0.17 million, 4.1% CAGR. They're showing positive growth. So it's a pretty diverse landscape.
It is. I think the UK's higher growth rate
Yeah.
might mean that they're putting a strong emphasis on investing in their dental infrastructure.
Right.
And, really embracing these new technologies. And Germany's substantial market size and its growth really underscores its role as, a leader in dental technology and innovation. And I think the fact that even smaller economies are experiencing growth means that there's a widespread trend of just improving dental care standards
Right.
across the continent.
Now, this is where the growth really takes off, okay?
Yeah.
Asia Pacific, their 2025 market is 11.09 million USD. But get this, the projected CGR from 2025 to 2033 is 7.3%.
Wow.
That makes it the fastest growing region by a lot. China holds the largest share within APAC, 4.66 million USD with a 6.8% CGR, which is, substantial. But India is actually showing even more rapid expansion.
Wow.
1.33 million USD with a 9.1% CGR, which the report attributes to, increasing awareness and innovation in the country. We also have Japan at 1.53 million, 5.8% CGR. South Korea at 1.11 million, 6.4% CGR. Australia at 0.58 million, 7% CGR. And Southeast Asia as a whole is moving quickly. It's 1.76 million USD with an 8.3% CGR.
It's a lot of upward momentum.
I think Asia Pacific is very clearly the growth engine for this whole market. And China's large market share, it's expected just because, they have a huge population.
Right.
And they're focusing more and more on healthcare. But India's high CAGR, 9.1%.
Yeah.
It's really noteworthy. I think it indicates how rapidly they're developing their dental care sector. And they're also quickly adopting these, advanced endodontic techniques.
Right.
And then the strong growth across Southeast Asia and Australia just further emphasizes the region's dynamic potential. And I think if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it might mean that companies that are currently focusing on more mature markets need to be paying attention to the opportunities and the potential competition that's emerging in Asia Pacific.
For sure. It definitely seems like that's the trend. Now let's move on to Latin America.
2025 market there is 2.41 million USD with a 4.7% CAGR.
Right.
Brazil's the big one here, 1.03 million USD and a 5.3% CAGR, which again, makes sense. It's a larger economy, developing dental industry. Argentina is also showing really strong growth, 0.4 million USD with a 5.6% CAGR.
Yeah. Brazil's, leading position in Latin America is consistent with, the fact that they have a more developed healthcare infrastructure compared to some of their neighbors. And I think Argentina's robust growth
Yeah,
could mean that they're emphasizing dental health more,
right.
or that they're improving access to some of these advanced treatments.
Right.
And I think the overall CAGR of 4.7% for the region shows steady progress. It's not quite at the explosive rate of Asia Pacific,
Right.
but, it's still going.
Yeah. And finally, let's look at the Middle East and Africa.
Okay.
2025 market of 0.96 million USD with a 5% CAGR. Now, the GCC countries lead this region with 0.41 million USD and a 5.8% CAGR, probably due to their, more advanced infrastructure,
Right.
greater awareness of dental care. South Africa is also expanding, 0.15 million USD with a 6% CAGR.
Yeah. The higher growth rate in the GCC countries likely reflects, they have stronger economies.
Right.
And they're making significant investments in healthcare infrastructure.
Yeah.
South Africa's growth also suggests that there's an increasing demand for more advanced dental treatments. And while the overall market size for the Middle East and Africa is still smaller compared to other regions, 5% CAGR still shows healthy expansion.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Focus on, how the market is segmented by different factors.
Okay.
First up is type.
Okay.
The report indicates that rotary files, like we talked about earlier, they currently hold the biggest market share.
Right.
However, manual files are actually identified as the fastest growing segment,
Interesting.
which, given all the technological advancements happening, this seems kind of counterintuitive. What do you think is driving that?
Yeah, it's a great point. Because while rotary files are preferred for their advanced capabilities, the reason why the manual segment is growing faster is probably because they're so cost effective.
Right.
And they're very easy to use, especially in regions where, they might not have access to more expensive equipment.
Right.
And then manual files, they give dentists a very tactile sense of control,
Oh, okay.
which some practitioners actually prefer. So while rotary files are like, the cutting edge, manual files are still relevant and a growing part of the market, especially in certain places. And then the report also mentions monitoring and therapeutic devices,
Oh, okay.
which could include things like apex locators,
Okay.
which help dentists determine the length of the root canal.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, looking at material type, nickel titanium, which is often referred to as knee-tie,
Right.
is the dominant material, which, again, that makes sense. It's superior flexibility and strength. That's essential for navigating the complex anatomy of these root canals. However, stainless steel is actually reported as the fastest growing material. Why is there this resurgence for this more traditional material?
Well, the reason for the increased growth in stainless steel files is likely because they're so durable and strong.
Right.
And also, importantly, they're less expensive than Niti alloys. So while Niti files offer exceptional flexibility and they're really resistant to fracture, stainless steel gives you a really good balance of these properties,
Right.
but at a more accessible price point. So that makes them a good option for, more practitioners
Right.
and procedures. And then the report also mentions post-acute as a material type,
Okay.
which I'm assuming might refer to the materials that are used in like the stages after the initial root canal cleaning.
Okay.
But the report doesn't give us like too many details on that category.
Gotcha. So again, it seems like cost is a really big factor
Yeah.
influencing, the market dynamics.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Moving on to distribution channel. Okay. Offline methods dominate right now, which makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Specialized medical supplies. You really want that direct relationship with the distributor. You want that hands-on support.
Right.
However, the report is also saying that online channels are experiencing very rapid growth. And this mirrors, what we're seeing across a lot of industries these days, right?
Right. Yeah. The fact that offline is still so dominant, it really reflects the traditional way that dental professionals have always gotten their supplies.
Right.
They rely on, those relationships that they've built over the years with distributors.
Right.
They get product knowledge. They get support after the sale.
Right.
But, the online channels are growing so fast.
Yeah.
And I think it just shows how appealing it is to have that convenience, the wider selection of products. And then you can compare prices so easily on those e-commerce platforms. And so I think this shift is just going to keep going as, digital literacy accuracy increases,
Right.
and people trust buying things online more,
Yeah.
especially within the dental profession.
Yeah. Finally, in terms of end-use dental clinics, they represent a huge portion of the market,
Yeah,
which is logical. They're the main providers of these treatments.
right.
But hospitals and OPDs, outpatient departments, are seeing the fastest growth here. Why are we seeing this increased utilization in those settings?
Well, the faster growth in hospitals and OPDs probably means that more dental procedures are being done there,
Okay.
which includes, more complex root canals in these institutional settings. And this could be because, they're getting more referrals for these specialized cases, or,
Right.
dental care is becoming more integrated within
Yeah.
the whole healthcare system. And then the demand for, advanced technology and precision in these settings would also contribute to the adoption of, these sophisticated endodontic files. And the report also lists other end use, which
Yeah.
could be things like dental schools
Right.
or research institutions
Right.
that are, involved with endodontic training.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This gives us a really comprehensive picture of the market.
It does.
Now, the report also talks about the competitive landscape.
Okay.
It highlights that companies are focusing a lot of their attention on product innovation,
Right.
especially for nickel titanium rotary files,
Yeah.
as well as technological advancements and strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
There's also a trend of companies expanding their product lines
Okay.
to include single-use instruments and, integrating digital technologies.
Wow.
And it also points out that there's a lot of competition
Yeah.
between these well-established players.
Right.
And then you have these emerging companies
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
coming in and offering these more cost-effective alternatives.
It's interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
The emphasis on innovation, especially for these nutty rotary files, shows that, they're really trying to improve clinical outcomes,
Right.
by
Yeah.
coming up with better materials, better designs.
Right.
The increasing adoption of single-use instruments probably has to do with growing concerns about infection control
Yeah.
and wanting to improve patient safety.
Right.
And then digital integration could be, features like connecting file usage data to patient records
Oh.
or incorporating the files into digitally guided surgery workflows.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's really interesting. The fact that there is so much competition
Right.
really suggests that, while there are these big companies, there's still opportunities
Yeah.
for newer companies to get some traction,
Right. Yeah.
by offering something different, whether it's through innovative features or, lower pricing.
Right.
The report gives us a specific example. They talk about Zark's launch of their Excalibur reciprocating file system.
Oh, wow.
Back in June 2022, this file uses a new gold alloy, okay?
Wow.
And they developed it in Spain.
Yeah.
And they're claiming that it has enhanced flexibility and performance
Yeah.
by getting rid of the shape memory. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's a really concrete example of all this innovation that's happening.
Totally. The Zark example really just shows you, the constant effort in the industry
Yeah.
to refine these materials and the designs,
Right.
to really try to address the problems that dentists are having during root canals.
Right.
Like developing a new alloy that's more flexible and that reduces that shape memory, it just makes the treatment so much easier
Right.
and more efficient for the patient.
Okay, let's get back to the market drivers, restraints, and trends one more time,
Okay.
just so we're all on the same page. The main things that are driving the market are that continuous product innovation,
Right.
which is leading to better and more efficient files,
Yeah.
advancements in dental technology overall,
Right.
which helps with precision, and then the government initiatives
Right.
that are trying to improve access to care and the quality of care.
Yeah. I think all of these drivers are connected.
Yeah.
And they create a really positive cycle for the market to grow.
Yeah.
Innovation leads to better technology, and then that gets supported and promoted by the government,
Right.
which then leads to better health outcomes for everyone.
Yeah. Now, the key restraints, as we talked about before, are not having enough trained professionals
Right.
who can actually use these new tools.
Right.
And then that limited awareness of these advanced options
Yeah.
in more rural or underserved areas.
Right.
And these are big things that need to be addressed if we want this market to really reach its full potential.
Absolutely. It just shows how important it is to invest in education and outreach. You could have the best endodontic files in the world, but if you don't have people who know how to use them
Right.
and patients who don't know about them, then it's not going to have a big impact.
Right. Right. And the main trends to keep an eye on are the increasing preference for rotary instruments, which means, things are moving towards faster and possibly more predictable procedures,
Right.
and the expansion of dental education programs, which will hopefully help with the shortage of trained professionals
Right.
as time goes on.
I think these trends show that the market is moving in a positive direction.
Yeah,
Technology is becoming super important,
right.
and there's a lot of effort being made to make sure that dental professionals have the skills they need
Right.
to really use these new advancements.
So to sum up our deep dive into this report,
Okay.
the global market for endodontic files is definitely growing. It's being driven by, all this new technology, the demand for better dental care.
Right.
However, the pace of growth and who the main players are, it really varies by region.
Yeah, that's a key takeaway.
Well,
While North America has the largest share right now, the fact that Asia Pacific is growing so fast means that things could change. The global market landscape could look totally different in a few years.
and it's also interesting to see what's happening with distribution.
Yeah.
The offline channels are still strong,
Right.
but the online platforms are growing way faster. So it'll be interesting to see how dental professionals buy their supplies in the future.
For sure. And then the innovation in materials like the nickel titanium and the technology like the rotary systems, these are the things that are shaping the future of endodontics.
So, listener, this report gives you a really good perspective on not just the market for these instruments, but also global trends that are affecting healthcare access, technology adoption, and economic development.
It's true. It shows how even these very specific markets can actually tell us a lot about bigger global trends.
Absolutely. So here's something for you to think about. As these minimally invasive procedures become even more common, how will endodontic files change? What kind of designs will they come up with? What materials will they use? And what kind of impact will these innovations have on the patient and the dentist down the road?
Yeah.
It's definitely an area to watch. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.